Pastor Bryce here, and welcome back to 5 Minutes for the Family. Just as we said last week, we're going to continue on in our foundational series as we talk about best practices in the home when it comes to training children as well as teens. And like we mentioned last week, today I want to mention personal devotions. And I want to start off with a question. What would your teen do if they were put in a situation where their faith was questioned? Would they have the tools that they need to be able to prove that the Christian faith is genuine? What if they were put in a situation like 12-year-old Jordan Woolley, and while she was in school, she was given an assignment, and on that assignment was listed out facts such as the cheetah is the fastest animal, or George Washington is the first president of the United States, the earth is flat, and there is a God. And in that assignment, they were asked to determine which things were true and which things were false. And when they turned in the assignment, those that said that there is a God were rebuked, made fun of, and told there most definitely is not a God. What would your teen do if they were put in that situation? Would they cave to the pressure? Or would they be able to prove that their Christian faith is genuine? Or like an account I read this morning of a homeschool mom who carefully and diligently brought up her child in the ways of the Lord, even sent that child to Awana where they memorized verses, and they were consistent, and they had all the trophies that they could have accumulated for biblical knowledge. But yet, when her daughter went off to college, on the very first day of college, she was shown a picture of a fish with human legs and told that there most definitely is not a God, and was told that anyone that believes so is at odds with science. Rest assured that your teen will eventually face opposition to their faith. And there's multiple ways that you can defend the Christian faith. You can take the historical approach, and you can look at the eyewitness accounts of what happened in the New Testament. You could take a look at the archaeological evidence for the things that happened in the Old Testament. You could use the moral argument. You could use the teleological argument. You could use the ontological argument. You could use all these arguments to argue for the validity of the Christian faith. But when you take a look at the New Testament writers such as Paul seem to show that one of the strongest evidences of the Christian faith is that it changes lives. For example, when Paul defended the gospel, he said that you knew what manner of life I lived before I met Christ, but after I met Christ and was given the gospel by Christ, you see that I was no longer an opponent of the church of Jesus Christ, but instead I was one of the strongest teachers in the church of Jesus Christ. Or the Apostle John, when he writes the epistle of 1 John, he writes, the things that I have seen and heard and touched, these are the things that I give to you. And he goes on to say in that epistle that if you say you believe them, but your life is not changed, you're a liar, and the truth is not in you. And so when the Bible talks about evidences for faith, one of the strongest evidences for the Christian faith is that it works. It continues to change lives. When people believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, it totally transforms them. And so if we want to model a valid Christian faith to our teens, how can we be transformed into the image of Jesus Christ? How can we be totally changed from one degree of glory to another degree of glory? And in order to determine that, let's take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 3. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, starting in verse 15, it says, "But even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on their heart. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord." And so Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 is teaching us how we can be transformed from one degree of glory to the next degree of glory, proving our Christian faith. And in verse 15 of this passage, he talks about Jews in their reading of Moses, or their reading of the law. And in their reading of the law, they did not turn to the Lord, or they did not turn in faith to Jesus Christ. The whole Old Testament, the law, bears witness of a Messiah that would come, and that Messiah is Jesus Christ. And if you read the book of Hebrews, this is something that the Jews continued to hold on to. They continued to hold on to the law without Jesus Christ. And the book of Hebrews argues in those beginning chapters that Jesus is better than anything and anyone. He is better than angels. He is better than the high priesthood. He is better than the law. He is better than the sacrifices. He is better than the holidays. He is better than the Sabbaths. Jesus is better than any of the traditions of Judaism in the Old Testament, because all of these things pointed towards Christ. And Jesus said he did not come to take these things away, but rather to fulfill them or to complete them. And so to read the Old Testament, to read the law and to not see Jesus Christ is to not be a believer in the God of the Old Testament. And so these who have their minds blinded read, but they did not read seeing Jesus. And so when we read our Bible, we want to read seeing Jesus. And the only way that we can see Jesus is by reading what the writers of the Bible tell us about him in the Word of God. And in verse 18, it says that when we behold Jesus with unveiled face, when we behold the glory of Jesus, which is the glory of God, we are transformed from one degree of glory to the next degree of glory. And how does that happen? Well, it happens as we're exposed to Jesus Christ in the Word of God. And it says in 2 Corinthians 4:6 that what actually happens is that the same God who commanded light to shine out of darkness in the beginning commands light to shine on our hearts. And we see God through the face of Jesus Christ. And we see Jesus Christ in the Scriptures. And so how can you be changed from one degree of glory to the next degree of glory? Well, in order to do that, you have to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ through prayer and through beholding him in the Word of God. And in having that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you will be changed from one degree of glory to the next degree of glory. And through all of that, by the grace of God, may your children say when their faith is questioned, may they say, no, I know that my faith is genuine, because while I was growing up, my parents professed that faith, and my parents' lives were totally changed by that faith. And by the grace of God, may they also say, as my parents' lives were changed by the glory of God, my life was changed by the glory of God. And because of the testimony of my parents, I also put my faith in Jesus Christ. And Jesus has not just changed my parents' lives, but Jesus has also changed my life. And through you walking in that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, may your children and may your teens know that the Christian faith is valid, and may all the glory go back to God. Once again, thank you for joining us here on 5 Minutes for the Family, and we'll see you next time.